like to welcome everybody out to our monthly educational today. I'm going to turn our time over to um, the our speaker today, which will be Stephen Balke, and he is going to have a great presentation for us today.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, everybody. So the presentation today is ad hoc, but as we've discussed, we're going to talk about something that I'm really hoping helps everybody, because I keep hearing time after time after time that we're still recovering from there's no recovering from people we have actually lost during the pandemic, but we're still recovering from the loss of some people's habits. So let's kind of break that apart and take a look at it and say what maybe we should have learned when we were first in the lodge, because the lodge has a whole lot. And if nobody's ever unpacked it for you, I know that I got to unpack a lot of it myself. I know that that's the experience of a lot of people. And I just want to kind of cover some highlights and maybe give you a little bit of something that maybe you can take back and share with others. So first, let's talk about some just generalities of the lodge. When we walk into a lodge, and I'm not going to say anything tiled, but I'm also going to kind of allude to some things that you might be able to then explore further. But when we first walked into a lodge, we were encumbered, and we were encumbered in ways that we weren't expecting. When we walked into that lodge for the first time, my understanding, and different people do it different ways in different jurisdictions, Hector, I said hello to earlier, is actually a Scottish Rite Mason, or a Red Lodge Mason. So his ritual, the premise, the whole 9 yards is very different from most, if not every person from the United States, which we go to Blue Lodge or the York Lodge first degrees. And me being one of those, I'm going to use my experience as a reference. So when we walked in, we were encumbered. And this was intentional. But what did it actually do to us? Well, when we are getting any information from anywhere, there's a few things that we need to realize we do when we're able, what information can come in. So the first thing is we've got filters, okay? We've got filters from our perceptions. We've got filters based upon our beliefs, or some static, not labeled or not maybe completely cognitively good pieces that we got when we were younger, and they are going to always shift the focus maybe a little bit on everything that we perceive. We've got values. These are the things that we've actually adopted, and we can say, yeah, I value this. And that's going to interrupt or get in the way of that. And then we've got our experience, and our experience is going to dictate some of the things we believe or don't believe, etc. That's a UFO. Well, okay, that's stretching it a bit, but but most of us are just going to go, there's no UFO here. Those are just, or we buy into it completely. Wow, I saw a UFO. But all of these things get in between us and accepting something new. But let's go back to that first one, our perception. What we did when we brought each of us into the lodge was we altered what we're used to perceiving. We changed the dynamic of sensory perception so that the one that you rely on most, not there. The others, heightened. Some lodges even go so far as to make sure there's all sensory interaction at points in the degree, but burning of incense, running of water, distribution of liquid beverages, etc. So first day on the lodge, we just take you out of comfort zone. And the whole point is to be in the moment so that you are cognitively assessing everything that you are experiencing. So that's point number one. We put people in the moment by taking away the comfort of normal sensory perception. And that actually gets in the way of a lot of the filters that you usually have. That actually stops them from being as effective. In other words, you're not going to necessarily have experienced the same things with your hearing, your tasting, your etc. when it's not there and available to you. So we take the candidate out of the comfort zone. We get them to acknowledge what they're doing and that they're doing it intentionally. Not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times. And who they're doing it in front of. And then we finish the degree with a whole lot of information, and the sensory input doesn't stop. And there's all kinds of different things that we could talk about apart just to the first degree. But what I want to do is I want to make that point real apparent. The first degree, you are here. Okay. Everybody's seen a map, right? You are here. That tells you where you're starting from so that you can go somewhere, right? The second thing I want to bring your attention to is there are 7 officers. And again, this might be different in different jurisdictions, but I think it's pretty much the standard. 7 officers. Okay. So we've got the master, we've got the wardens. They're always there. We've got the treasurer and secretary. Then we've got the deacons. Next, we go to, it takes you through your first exposure to a way of learning. You experience first, then you are given something to think about, and then you are given the time to do something so that you can, number one, engage your cognitive interaction, and 2, be more able to interact on that same subject as you go through. So if you didn't know before you walked in the door, then it was probably mentioned at the end of the degree that, hey, you're going to do some memorizing. And this is hugely important. The memorization, a lot of places don't make you memorize. A lot of York Rite bodies, a lot of the extended bodies in Masonry don't make you memorize. And if you don't currently memorize, I understand. It's not easy for anybody. It seems easier for some people than others. But here's the thing about the memorization. What we're going to talk next is the fellowcraft degree, and that's going to tell us where to go and find out why we're memorizing, along with a lot of other whys. But our first degree sat there and said, you are here. And now if you want to go, this is how you go. You know, you did some time in walking, and then you went back on yourself. Well, that's because those 2 ashlers up there are, this is where you want to go, and you picture this first. And then you remember where you are. That way you know how to get there. And that was our first exposure, and it only happened once. And then you were taught to approach life in due form. Now, a couple of things. The treasurer and the secretary are there for the first degree. I think this is all my opinion, by the way. My opinion is that the treasurer and the secretary are there in the first degree because part of you are here is this is the secular world around you. And in order to really be here, in order to be able to go forward, you need to get these things in the bag. The socks need to be in the bag. Money needs to be something that you're not concerned with. You're not chasing the almighty dollar. And how you record your life. We're given the secretary, we're also given the 24-inch gauge, at least in the Blue Lodges again, by which we are taught to divide our time. And we are taught to regulate ourselves because we're a machine. We're a biological machine, but we're a machine. And the manifested human form needs to do some things. If you don't eat for 10 days, you're going to be awfully hungry, maybe in the hospital. If you don't drink water for 3, you might not be with us for very long. We have to do some things with some regularity, and the more conscious control we take, we call it circumscribing our passions. The more conscious control we take, the more the body is going to listen to us. Because remember, where you came from is somebody who is very likely in our society today been infected with some bad habits. Not intentionally in most cases, but that's the way that our society works. The way that we are taught to do things in order to get them to be effective for us is we're exposed where you're in a cognitive aspect, and you're taught to, hey, I can think about it and I can make some mistakes here. But then you get to the, associative part, and that's where, well, this is how they do it, and this is how I've done it before, and you're associating it with the different things. And then we plateau because we automate it. Everything in our bodies and everything, we automate habits. We automate them, and our brain and our consciousnesses are used to that scenario. So this is what we're trying to get past by walking in the door to Masonry and saying, I'm here and I want to go to a better place, which means I need to unmake some habits. But first, I need to know that they're there. I mean, I need to be aware that there should be a change if I want to create a different result. When we walk in the door, most of us are living in cause, effect, result, consequence. But the thing is the cause is usually external and the effect is usually a reaction, not a cognitive interaction or an action. So when we walk in the door, our first job as Masons is to realize you are here. And you can be right here, right when, in this moment, and you can act by cognitively making choices. And I think that is what should really be taught in the first degree. The second degree is the fellowcraft. And it's the shortest of our Blue Lodge degrees, and it really packs a wallop because it doesn't sit there and say, hey, this is the easy one. It's like, hey, if you are perezoso or if you are lazy, then you need to wake up because you got a lot of work to do. We give you 7 areas of study, and we're not saying know how to spell them. We are saying go deep. And I'm gonna absolutely pick on a particular one. And it's because it doesn't get discussed. Well, actually, it does get discussed in some circles a lot. It should be discussed more in Lodge, because one of the things, we go back to that memory statement that we were talking about. Let's talk about rhetoric. If you don't know, then a really good thing to know if you're going to study this is that the Ad Horenum, which was written about 2,000 years ago, is the reference that was most used during the Middle Ages, the Renaissance. It's the go-to book. And a really important part of that, from my perspective, is that it actually describes what a memory palace is. Now, if you didn't know, the Lodge of Masons has been used by memory gurus as, oh yeah, that's what they're doing. And most people, I swear, most people that I talk to don't know what a memory palace is. Another name for it is Loki method or the Loci method, because it was, Latin, written by ostensibly written by Cicero, but we don't know that. But it was the Ad Horennium, and if you look that up, it's a really great reference on how to dialogue publicly, it's basically how to act. It's like the Vanderbilt for the BC era. So it teaches you manners, it teaches you protocols, it teaches you how to interact, but it also teaches you how to remember things. And the reason it teaches you how to remember things is because when you're standing up speaking in front of people, having things come to your mind quickly is going to keep their attention and make your ability to communicate more effectively happen. So the memory palace is where you match a symbol with a word or a label, a descriptor. And whether you're aware of it or not, our entire society is based upon trying to get us to use words, to use an interpreter, to label things exactly so that we can communicate them. But that's not how the brain works. So we use symbols. Brain thinks in pictures, period, end of story. That's been proven time and time again. We think in pictures. Even blind people think in pictures. But we sit here and think about a police car or an ambulance, and we go, it looks like a big red box on the front of a truck or on the back of a truck that goes by, and and the sound goes from this ear to this ear. And we think of that box, and we might have a specific ambulance agency, and we might have, and blind people don't. They just have this blotch, is the best that people can determine. They're actually studying that because it's very interesting that people who are born not able to see, so they have no reference, they have no association, still see. They don't describe it as seeing, but they make a mental image. And they see it. They see different things differently. We all think in images. So when we're taught to walk in and know when you walk in the door, junior deacon, junior ward, or senior warden, senior deacon, senior deacon, treasurer, master, secretary, these are all images that you have, and they're associative. When you circumambulate the lodge, you are being taken around and exposed to different symbols. And some of them are the apron and the ashlars, and some of them are discussed further. And we're told to learn what these tools are for. We are told to learn what the great and lesser lights of Masonry are. And if you go and take that and you take it seriously, there's a lot more there. I mean, I'm talking about one little chapter of the Ad Horennium, which is one reference for one of the aspects of a lecture that says 7 different. I mean, when you start unpacking Masonry, there's a lot of there. One of my pet peeves is when we raise a master mason. Well, we've made a master mason. No, we haven't. We've given the guy an opportunity to start a lifelong journey of learning. And while we're talking about learning, a definition that I've recently heard through course of study in neurolinguistic programming, which I'm kind of adopting, is that learning is actually when you make a choice to not be satisfied with an understanding of a fact or a piece of knowledge or an idea, and you expand your perspective in order to accommodate something that did not necessarily fit in with your previous perspectives. That learning allows us to, have not only a level of interaction, but it also says that we are consciously doing something. And what we're actually consciously doing is taking it from something that we know, a knowledge label that we know this, and then we come to understand it, and then we actively interact with it. And that is the steps to wisdom. And we might also see in a lodge, you know, beauty, you are here. It's beautiful. Strength, you know and understand some things. Wisdom, you are doing things, and you're doing them consciously and effectively. So when you unpack the second degree, it should take you years, but there's, Hector, I referred to him. I'm going to use him a little bit because he's got some cool tools down in Mexico. He's got a book. In order to go from the entered apprentice to the fellow craft, you have to do 33 exercises, which they're not small exercises. They're like 5 to 7 pages a piece. You have to write about the topic of the exercise, and then you have to present it to an oral board in lodge. So by the time that you are a fellow craft in at least some parts of Mexico, you're not unaware, because number one, you had to study. Number two, the brethren had to accept your interpretations and your study. They don't have to agree with it, but you have to do the work. The work has to be done. So now we're coming to the end of the fellow craft, where you're at the point where you're like, okay, I'm at least familiar with how to get more information, and I know it's a lifelong learning process, and I'm going to go through it. Now comes the Master Mason. Well, hell, this is the one where in the York Rite Lodges, they say all of the implements of masonry inclusive, especially the trowel. You know, there are only two things to say about this degree. All of the implements of masonry inclusive. Don't forget about the specific use of each one. Those are symbols. If you associate them in your mind and you know what they're supposed to do for you, they can start being your working tools. And especially the trowel. The end of that lecture, at least in New Mexico, it ends with best work and best degree. Now, there's a lot of study out there. There's a lot of different science out there. The bottom line is you can point to a lot of things that say happy emotions have more power, more energy. They're at a higher frequency. I mean, it's actually like scientifically proven that they're better for you. And the only one trying to prove, the only one trying to prove that is somebody who's kind of immersed in it. So if we just take those 2 points, we understand that our brain is going to work when we actually use the working tools intentionally by putting the meanings behind them and putting them in front of ourselves every day. And then when it comes to the interactions, we best work and best agree intentionally. So again, I don't know about your lodges, but in my lodge, it's really, really not good. In other words, you can get chucked if you talk about religion or politics. So let's look at that. Let's kind of break that apart a little bit. It's really simple, actually. You see, I do the York Rite leadership, and Adam Hathaway came up with a really, really, really powerful concept. You manage things, you manage projects, you lead people, you influence people. So when we say no religion in politics, what we're really saying is you and I can have a talk about this thing. And no matter what we talk about this thing, it's very much less likely that you are going to be emotionally attached and have something that is so going to make you frustrated because there's an emotional attachment, it's much less likely that you are going to be emotionally attached to this thing. So let's talk about this thing where we can find the things that we agree about, where we can find the parts, the aspects, the attributes of this thing that we can agree on, and we can go do something about it. And we're not talking about things that usually have a lot of emotions and a lot of experiences and all this other. In other words, let's leverage the fact that we've gone through these degrees together and we have a commonality of experience, and find something that we aren't going to break apart the closer trust opportunities that we have by working on something that we can both agree on. That way we can find out how compromise is supposed to work. We can find out how understanding is supposed to come about, and we can experience the application of the precepts, tenets, and just good damn lessons that we're given in Masonry should be applied. Thank you all very much for your attention. And now, after a pause for station identification, we'll come back and talk about it.